Today on Locked On Red Wings, Nikolaj Ehlers is reportedly on the trade block. Would he make a good fit for the Detroit Red Wings?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a former producer for 97.1 The Ticket, where Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Pretty straightforward. Indeed you do. Pretty straightforward episode for you guys today. It was reported like a week or two ago now by The Athletic that Nikolaj Ehlers, again, for like the third season in a row, is reportedly...
It's like death, taxes, and Ehlers being on the trade block.
Right.
Like it's just one of the three guarantees in life.
He signed a max length 8-year deal now 7 years ago as he's going into the final year, and it feels like every single offseason it's like Nikolaj Ehlers supposedly on the trade block. So we're going to talk about that because I think it's a fun conversation to picture him in a Red Wing uniform because of the skill set he brings to the table and what the Red Wings need as well. But also, you know, before we get to that, there was an actual real trade that just broke that could have real life implications behind it.
As we hit record.
As we were about to hit record. Thankfully, we were just, messing around. We didn't get straight to the recording. We never do. We never do. We always talk a little bit before.
I always bully Brian for like 10 minutes before we record.
Yeah, I have low self-esteem and it's all your fault. But Ryan McDonagh was traded from the Nashville Predators back to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And interesting move by the Tampa Bay Lightning. I really liked the McDonagh trade to the Predators, and it worked well. I mean, they got the Predators back to the playoffs. I was rooting for them in the first round. I liked their team. I had Gus Nyquist having a career year. That was a fun team for me. But I still hate their uniforms, but they were a fun team. So I'm surprised that they traded McDonagh back to Tampa Bay. I'm assuming it's because they're kind of cap strapped and like their cup window, let's be honest, is not really all that great to begin with. Definitely on the running on the last fumes, it seems, for their cup window. So trading him back to Tampa, though, was a really interesting decision for just a few picks going back the other way, because going into the offseason, Tampa Bay only had about $12 million in cap space, and Ryan McDonagh makes 6.75. And as far as I know, I saw the Predators' official release, does not appear to be any salary retained on this. Doesn't this make it a little bit difficult to keep Steven Stamkos? Like, I've been pretty adamant that he's not leaving. We did this song and dance 8 years ago with Steven Stamkos and he ended up re-signing the day of free agency with the Tampa Bay Lightning back when Yzerman was the general manager. But now that they're going to have less than $6 million to play with in free agency and a lot of other holes to fill, unless you're moving other pieces out or Stamkos takes a huge discount, which I don't think he's worth less than $6 million, even at this stage in his career. He was great again last year. I do really wonder what this means for that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly raises eyebrows in terms of the Stamkos situation. I still would be surprised if he left or if they at least like didn't make a run at him, right? Like if they're, if they're throwing offers his way and he's just like okay with moving on, which again, just given the I don't know, lore and like importance he is to that franchise would be somewhat surprising. But like I could see him leaving, but I still really would be surprised if he did. We still have a whole offseason ahead of us. There's still going to be more trades that Tampa can pull off. And obviously we have free agency when it comes around. I still think that they are in a position where they can trade away some more cap now that they've taken on some and free up any money that they would need to bring him back. I still would be surprised. That being said, this certainly doesn't make it a super clear path, and it doesn't make it, maybe as much of a layup as it was. I also really like this move from Nashville's perspective. They get rid of, again, we're presuming, we haven't seen any reason to believe otherwise. We're presuming that they're getting rid of all of the salary. And on top of that, they're getting a second round pick. I know they had to give up a fourth, but like, I don't know, getting, if that's the direction that your franchise is headed, to get all of that money off the books and get a second round pick, that's really not bad value at all, to be honest. So, I like it for both teams. Tampa's obviously trying to make the most of a window that is probably on the downturn. But man, I think the biggest question is, how does this affect, the like Twitter joke, whenever anything happens in the NBA, people go, how does this affect LeBron James's legacy? Now,
does this affect LeBron James's legacy?
It does. It's like, how does this affect their ability to re-sign Steven Stamkos?
Yeah. Ryan from Grindline replied to me and asked, maybe they made this trade for a buyout. Like, Nashville can't make the buyout, Tampa could, but that doesn't make sense to me personally because of the fact that they gave up a second round pick.
Yeah.
To buy a player out, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think because you gave up a second and a seventh and got a fourth in return, this just feels like you're trading for the player, which just is, again, I just think that really makes it a lot harder to re-sign Steven Stamkos unless you make other moves. And I'm okay with that because I'd love to have some hopium right now that Steven Stamkos could be a Detroit Red Wing next year and reunite with Steve Yzerman. So that's going to be a conversation we're going to have really soon now. It was always on our docket, but now that this trade has happened and it's eaten up a lot of the little salary cap that they do have, like I'm going to be chomping at the bit to talk about this as soon as we have an off day. But This week's already booked with the Griffins and then another guest appearance later on in this week. But next week, we're probably going to have that Steven Stamkos conversation now. But now let's get on to the conversation we set up for in this episode. It's talking about maybe acquiring another top six winger in Nikolaj Ehlers. Nikolaj Ehlers last year with the Winnipeg Jets had 61 points in 82 games, 25 goals, 36 assists. Pretty close to Alex DeBrincat levels of production. He made $6 million. He has one more year left before becoming an unrestricted free agent. He is 28 years old. He shoots left, plays primarily, from what I saw, left wing, but on Cap Friendly says he can play both left and right. 6'2", 172 pounds. Normally I ask Scotty, should the Red Wings trade for him? But I feel like we're both going to be in agreement that Red Wings should, if they can, pull it off. I guess the better question is, does he fit?
Yes. Look, man, like we've been talking about this ad nauseum, right? Like, this is a team that desperately this offseason needs to add a top six winger. And that is exactly what you would be getting. And you can figure out, like who he plays with and the mixing and matching of those lines. You can figure out when you get to the fall. The fact of the matter is, this summer, a very high priority, for some people the highest priority, is going to be bringing in a top six forward, just in general. We talked about it a lot during the season. We've talked about it a lot already in the month that the offseason's been going on. This is a team that most nights, even post-signing Patrick Kane, was going out there and had, 5 solidified players in that top six, and then there was kind of a revolving door in the sixth. And now, especially if you're losing Kane on top of that, then that number may even go down to 4. So is it a fit? Yes. I don't even really think it's too much of a question. If this is a guy you can bring in, you do it. The biggest question for me is, is the opportunity cost worth it? Is what you'd have to give up worth the production you get back?
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting part. I mean, this is a player in Nikolaj Ehlers who, in 7 of his 9 NHL seasons, has scored 20-plus goals. And in almost every single one of those seasons, he at least matches his goal total with assists as well. He's always 40-plus, almost always 40-plus points. The one of the 2 years he didn't score 20-plus goals, it was an injury-shortened season for him, just 45 games played the year prior to this one. And he had 38 points in those 45 games, 12 goals, 26 assists. This year he had 25 and 36. So his goal totals have remained the same, but his assist totals have continued to climb year in and year out. This is a guy that everyone always says that Winnipeg's not using to the fullest of their ability. And despite that, he's had good production as a top 6 winger. To me, it just makes too much sense, right? You just talked about it there. What is the Detroit Red Wings' biggest need? You always say it's goaltending. I always say it's top 6 forward. Those are both huge needs. They can address one of those needs
For sure.
with this trade, right? And during the season, what was the thing we kept saying? They need one more top 6 winger because they had DeBrincat, who plays left side. They have Raymond, who plays right side. Kane, who plays right side. Ehlers plays, from what I could tell, mostly on the left side as a left-handed shot. And if Kane does return, then boom, your top 6 for next season is solidified immediately.
Yeah.
If Kane
you get
doesn't,
Kane back and him, you would have a top 6.
but like even without that, if Kane doesn't return, well, then you're still okay because of the fact that you have Nate Danielson, who plays right, and if he doesn't work out at center, he can play and transition to winger, or maybe Marco Kasper's better as an offside shot on the wing because he shoots left, like Alex DeBrincat, who shoots right but plays on the left side. So like
And
you
still
have
all of free agency. We just talked about,
you have all free agency, and you have all of this draft where it's winger heavy. Like the bottom line is they need another top 6 winger, and he fills that role. I'm going to talk about more why he fills that role and what would it take to acquire him in segment 2. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. They streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed data. Even better, Indeed's the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have job requirements. Indeed is the unbelievably powerful hiring platform, delivering 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest in 2019. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 job credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed you do.
Yes, you do, baby. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. And so, Scotty, when we talk about Nikolaj Ehlers, right, we talk about all the things he can provide, which is just production in the top 6, something this team desperately needs, especially after we saw how feeble this team's scoring was without Dylan Larkin down the stretch last season, with the exception of Lucas Raymond, obviously. So I'm starting looking, I'm like, what doesn't he do well, right? Like, he has to have some flaw. What's the reason why they want to put him on the trade block? And the biggest thing I can tell is he makes $6 million and he's going to be up for a new contract. So they want to deal him before he's up for more, because due to their cap situation, it's likely they will not be able to re-sign him. I looked at pretty much everything. I looked at puck IQ. I looked at the player usage chart on Dobber Hockey. And yeah, he gets overall offensive zone deployments. His quality of competition is pretty much on that 0 line. So he's getting deployments against the tough competition. He's getting deployments against the easy competition. It evens out really well. It's right on 0 on that x-axis. And his Corsi percentage relative at expected goals for, at Corsi, and at Fenwick are all well positive. And most of his points, 47 of his 61 points this season came via 5-on-5. So he's not a power play merchant. His defensive game is fine. Dobber Hockey qualifies him as a effective top 6 two-way forward. He gets power play time as well. He was third among forwards on power play. The only thing he doesn't really play is penalty killers, but you can fill that void with signings like Christian Fischer, right? Like, you can find penalty kill specialists to fill out your bottom 6. Nikolaj Ehlers, just checks all the boxes, right? He's not too reliant on the power play to get his points. He plays a very even game against even competition. And the one thing you could say maybe is his numbers look so good. He's getting a lot of offensive zone deployments. because of the fact that he plays on the Winnipeg Jets, which is a much better team than the Detroit Red Wings. But that's why I look to relative, right? Like his Corsi for percentage might be 56%, but relative, it's still positive compared to his teammates. I struggle to see an area where this guy does not fit the needs of the Detroit Red Wings, right?
Yeah.
He's bang, like it's good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, again, as we kind of alluded to before the break, one of the bigger questions is going to be, what is Winnipeg looking for? Like, this is a team that had a really good season this year. One of the origins, not, rumors, I'm not sure it's the origin, but one of the early pieces this offseason that talked about, Winnipeg possibly trading him was the Winnipeg Sun's Scott Billeck wrote an article, and in that he was attacking it from the angle of what can they do to trade Ehlers to bring in a top 4 defenseman. And that's where I think if there is any disconnect, it might be, right? Like Winnipeg just had a really, really good season. And if you can dangle a bunch of defensive prospects in front of them and bring in a guy like Ehlers, then maybe that's a route. But for as good of a season as they had this year, I think they're probably more in the market to bring in a top 4 defenseman right now, not somebody who has the ceiling of a top 4 defenseman down the road. And I'm not really sure the Wings have that just as their disposal. Now, that's not to say that the only way you can trade for him is by giving them, somebody that fits that profile. That's just what one writer in Winnipeg was kind of attacking at it from. But if that is their end game, then you need to either set them up to just give them a guy who is of that caliber to help their team that is very much in win now mode, I would imagine, after this past season, or you need to set them up nicely so that they can go get that in free agency. And I think that those are, again, if that is the end game for them, which is an if, again, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, it's one writer, but if that is their end game, then that could be where it gets tricky from the Wings' perspective.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying too, and I tried to look at like recent trades for players that are around that production and what they went for. Right, last offseason we saw the Detroit Red Wings trade for they did trade away Dominic Kubalik for Alex DeBrincat, and it's hard to judge that one impartially because I know Alex DeBrincat had a huge say in where he went. He basically only wanted to go to Detroit,
completely away from Ottawa.
Right, and he was a restricted free agent, whereas Ehlers is a unrestricted free agent, pending unrestricted free agent going into the next offseason. So the circumstances are a little bit different, but in that trade, you gave up Kubalik, Dominic Sabrango, a 4th rounder, and a conditional 1st round pick. And that's still like you gave up a 1st round pick for a guy that had a lot of say into where he wanted to go. You looked at Jake Gensel trade, right, from Pittsburgh to Carolina. Pittsburgh acquired Michael Bunting in return, and I believe a conditional 1st round pick as well. So like that's one. And you look at the outside of a couple 40-goal seasons for Jake Gensel, you look at a guy like him as maybe a good comp for what you could expect back, like an established player in a 1st round pick, or in this case, as the writer says, a top prospect in a 1st round pick. I don't like to come up with hypothetical packages, so to speak, on the podcast because nobody knows what the price tag is on a player until the trade is made because price tags change drastically from general manager to general manager year to year. But like, could you get away with a conditional 1st round pick and maybe Albert Johansson, right? We talk about how packed this defensive core is. They want a young defenseman who has a decent ceiling. Albert Johansson, I think, as his ceiling is a 2nd pair defenseman or could be a 2nd pair defenseman. 1st round pick, Albert Johansson. And I don't know. That's where after that, I feel like you'd have to throw in something else. But I always overvalue these trades as well. Every single year we do these trade things, I'm like, we're going to have to give up so much to get this player of this caliber. And then Yzerman makes a trade. And next thing you know, you gave up like nothing really of any consequence. Like losing the 2nd 1st round pick this year sucks, but it wasn't even your 1st round pick you gave up to begin with. That was the condition on it. It was whoever finished better was the 1st round pick given up, and Boston finished better. So you gave up Boston's 1st round pick that you acquired in the Bertuzzi trade. So I think a 1st round pick is like, that's the start of the conversation. And if they want a high-end defensive prospect, you're not obviously giving up Simon Edmondson. That's a non-starter in my opinion. But I think they have a cabinet full of strong, I wouldn't say like blue chip defensive prospects, but Yzerman did a good job of building up the cabinet. There's William Wallander, Antti Tuomisto, and Albert Johansson, obviously Axel Sandin Pellikka, but I don't think they're willing to trade him away either. Like you have a cabinet full of guys, and Albert Johansson's NHL ready. Like you get him, you can slide him in immediately, and he's under team control. I think that makes a lot of sense. From there, it might take a little bit more to grease the wheel to get the trade to be accepted. Maybe give another pick to receive a crappier pick, like they just basically upgrade on a pick. But I think that this trade is very doable. The big question after that is how much do you have to pay him to keep him here?
Right. Yeah, and that's always a question we have too. And again, like, you know, kind of circling back, I think just the conversation from Winnipeg's perspective, if it's just somebody that plays defense, then like maybe, but again, like they're very much, I mean, after this season, I would find it hard to believe they're not in win now mode. I have a hard time believing that if defenseman is the priority, that they're going to be willing to take on somebody who like, oh, someday could be that. I feel like they're more in the mindset of we need a top 4 defenseman now. We're not going to trade one of our more productive wingers that's, you know, gonna put up 60 plus point seasons for a guy that, you know, and obviously the pick matters too, but like that might be that top 4 guy we want, you know, in a couple of years down the road. And again, like Johansson there's going to be an argument for him to be in the NHL this fall, but I feel like giving up a player of that caliber, they're going to want a direct, like this guy is immediately like top pair or top 4 defenseman on opening night, and there's no like hesitation or question about it.
Do they want Ben Sherratt? I mean, I'll give them Ben Sherratt if they want. Like,
wow, that's so bold of you.
You're not giving up Seider, you're not giving up Edvinson, so it's
right.
It's
that's
really
my point.
like
That's my point. Is I feel like, and again, I want to reiterate. There's nothing that says like that's guaranteed what the Jets are looking for, and there's nothing else. You know, like this was one writer who was just writing, you know, his rumor piece. But if it is, you know, top 4 defenseman, then yeah, the wings are going to be hard to line up there because they don't really have, outside of Seider and Edvinson, who are non-starters, a solidified, guaranteed top 4 defenseman on a playoff team today.
Okay, that's fair enough. We got to head to another quick break. When we return, we'll talk about contract situation. If they do get him, what do they got to pay him? So stay tuned for that in segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about contract extension. He's got 1 year left at $6 million. If you do trade for him, you're going to want to extend him. You don't want to trade for a 1 year rental. You want him to be a piece of your team for the future going forward. We know that Yzerman hates giving out 8-year deals, but when it comes to just the salary, right, of it, he gave a 4-year extension to Alex DeBrincat, who that extension kicks in this year at about $7 million. He's got contracts that he has to give to Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, who are going to get paid anywhere between 6 and 9, depending on the player, like on the high end. And so your cap space going into this year, we've been talking about it. If you give 8 and 8, just on a conservative standpoint, right? Like assuming you give 8 to both players as I guess I'd say worst case scenario for the cap implications behind it, you are left with about $12 million in cap space. And then you have to then go ahead and re-sign Ehlers as well. You know, what kind of contract value would he be looking at coming off a $6 million contract for a guy who is as consistent of a scorer as he is?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine a pay bump. I don't think that once you finish this deal that he should be like one of the, 3 highest paid players on the team. I think that is probably too much, but I think it's going to be what's the word I'm thinking of? A raise, goodness, from what he's been getting. Is that raise going to be $2 million? No, it shouldn't be, at least, but it's probably going to be more than the 6 he's getting paid right now.
Right, and I already comped him to Jake Gensel, but I'm going to do that one more time, right? Jake Gensel is also making $6 million. His contract's up this year. He signed it a year after Ehlers did, but it was 1 year shorter. So that's up at the end of this season, and he's going to need a pay raise. They both made $6 million. Their production is similar. Ehlers is a little bit less, as Jake Gensel tacked on a couple 40-goal seasons in there, but the consistency out of Ehlers in terms of like 20 to 30 goal scorer every single year almost is, I think, going to keep his cap. He's going to get a raise because the cap hit's going up, and people think that he still hasn't even reached his absolute peak yet, with people saying that Winnipeg isn't using him right. But the thing is like, I don't want to get stuck in a situation like the LA Kings did, where they traded for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like, this is the worst case scenario. Traded for Pierre-Luc Dubois, a guy whose career high was 63 points or whatever, and then signed him to an $8.75 million contract. Like, if he's making, in my eyes, he's got to be making around what DeBrincat makes, right? 7.5 or whatever it is for DeBrincat. I think it's like $7.4 million. I would struggle, like, at the high end, $8 million. He's obviously not going to get more than Dylan Larkin, who makes, 8.71 or whatever it is, the cheeky number that he makes. But I also struggle to see him making much more than 8 on a high end, just because while his scoring is consistent and the cap is going up, that consistent number is still usually 20 to 29 goals. He has never reached the 30-goal marker. And I think outside of one season, let me look back on him, I think he's only reached 70 points once in his career. I don't even think, no, he hasn't even done that. His career high is 64.
Consistently in the 60s, yeah. Like I said, I would be surprised if it was, 8+ mil. I think that would that would surprise me a little bit. He's 28 as well, so you can get him for a decent amount of years and not feel bad about it, which is good. But yeah, I would expect, I don't know, 7, give or take $0.5 mil, maybe 7.25, give or take $0.5 mil.
Yeah, but the question is that acceptable for Ehlers, right? Because he's going to be a pending UFA. He might think he could get more. So that's going to be the tough part.
Well, and that's the thing, that the Wings aren't going to make that trade if they're not absolutely confident that they could re-sign him.
But I would just get nervous that maybe you have to overpay for him, because he could get paid even more on the UFA.
Trades, like when you trade for somebody with a year left.
Yeah, and that's where I get nervous too, because he could score more, but am I comfortable paying? I don't know. Like Alex DeBrincat money, I'd be comfortable with, and it would solve your top 6 issue. You wouldn't have to go onto the free agent market and give Gensel $9+ million, right? Which is what he's probably going to get on the open market. If you could negotiate a contract with Ehlers before he hits the open market, it's going to come in at a lower number. But at the same time, you got to it's going to have to happen along with the trade, more than likely. So that's the really hard part. He's got a 10-team no trade clause too, so we might even be on that. He might not even come here to begin with. But
no clue.
Years, probably 5 to 6, I would imagine. 7.
Yeah, 4 to 6, something like that.
I don't, because Yzerman hates giving out those long-term deals, but at the same time, Ehlers is probably looking for a long-term contract, because he wants to carry this through. Probably this is he's 28 years old. This is the big-time contract.
Yep.
So he's going to want 7 or 8 years again. Those are all the hiccups, because Yzerman's such a tough negotiator. I can never predict when it comes to what the trade value is and what the next contract value would be. But so we're just completely spitballing, but that's just where my gut reaction would be for trades and for a new contract for a guy of his caliber. But man, negotiations are always just so tough.
So is all of that worth it, right? Is the years, the money that we just talked about, and the price-ish that we threw out there, is that all worth it to you?
I think it still is. And the main reason being, again, he is in his prime of his career. He would fit the window for when the Red Wings want to try and become a winner. He is consistently one of the best players on a Winnipeg Jets team already, right? That's already very good. All his relative numbers look great. The bulk of his points come at 5-on-5, and he fills a huge hole for the team in the top 6. I think that he checks almost all the boxes. The only thing that would make me nervous is how much he would get paid. But at the same vein, that's just hockey, baby. If you want to have some of the best players in the league on your team, you got to pay them like the best.
I agree. Yeah. I really, it's very difficult to gauge in the infancy of these rumors. type of package it would take to get him, I mean, we are really just throwing,
We're just throwing
right,
things at the wall.
just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I do think that even given all of this, that's still probably something that if the Wings did it, I would be pleased with. So.
Absolutely. All right, Scotty, do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. Some prospect rankings came out. We can talk about those later.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that too. Speaking of
Viewed
that, right?
the Wings pretty highly. So.
They did. They do view the Wings pretty highly. Interestingly enough, though, they must not consider Albert Johansson a prospect anymore because they are not. He is not in their McKeen's Hockey's top 10. McKeen's Hockey ranked the Detroit Red Wings as having the best prospect pipeline in the NHL.
Be a prospect, but Edmondson is.
Age, I would assume. That's the only thing I could figure. His waiver eligibility is gone. Like, he needs a new contract. He's not on his rookie deal anymore.
Right, yeah.
Only thing I can think of. Because William Wallinder's on here at 8th. I mean, I guess I can understand him having aged out of the prospect category, I guess. But William Wallinder's on here. It goes Simon Edmondson, Nate Danielson, Marco Kasper, Axel Sandin, Pelika, Sebastian Costa, Trey Augustine, Carter Mazer, William Wallander, Shai Buim, and Dmitry Buchelnikov out in Russia as the Red Wings' top 10 prospects, according to McKeen's. We love the Red Wings prospect pool getting love. We know that they really lack a blue chip prospect, but Yzerman's done such a great job of just giving us NHL caliber prospects up and down the prospect pool. So we'll talk about that more in depth probably next week because our slate is pretty full for the rest of the week, given the Griffins are playing and we have a couple guests coming on. So we'll talk about that later. Any final thoughts?
We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Good.